How's it going, Riley?
Good, how are you?
It's going good. Going good. I wonder if anyone else will show up today.
You don't think they will?
Oh, I'm sure somebody will. I'm confident. How's everything going with work?
Pretty good. I just had a talk with Michelle, my line manager, today. She said she's heard a lot of positive things about my work and she was going to try to get me to work on a project from start to finish.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I was excited about that.
That's pretty exciting for sure.
Yeah.
Is that Michelle Sugent?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We've communicated a couple times about some other things, not about you or anything. Just, but I know Rebecca has been out for maternity leave, so
Yes.
Michelle's been doing some of, I guess, her work or whatever.
Yeah, she definitely fills that role.
Gotcha. Sweet. So staying busy with everything else?
Yeah, pretty much just trying to enjoy the weather and
It's fantastic. I mean, it
get my
is.
exercise.
I hear you. I'm with you on that. I know it's for sure. Hey, Batul.
Hey, Doc.
How's it going?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, it's going great. How's work? Everything going well?
Yes, it has actually. Yes, going on pretty good.
Good. The summertime is always kind of a fun time, or it's a different time because the pace of like, even though classes are happening, it's just very different because the weather's nice and the schedules are always a little bit different. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it's one of those times when you want to actually do something outside and you have to do an assignment.
well, yeah, there is that. If you can find somewhere nice outside to do it, that would be even better.
That's true.
David, how are you? Heather, Dami, good to see everybody. Matt. Hello to all. Again, Madison has a conflict, so I know she won't be here. So Anthony may be here or not. I'm not sure what his schedule is looking like, but I imagine he'll be chiming in potentially. So for tonight, what we'll do is just review a little bit, answer any questions that you may have or that may come up. And we'll preview a little bit of this coming week's material as we go forward. So what I will do, hey Anthony, it's good to see that you're here. Hey. So again, tonight may not be a particularly long session. It'll really just, I have a few things just to kind of walk through and cover. Next week will probably be a little bit more, more involved. So this coming week, chapter 2 is the material, and we'll talk about it more here in a little while, but it's actually more where you have a data set and you're doing some work on it. And so next week, there'll probably be a little bit more of a review of that work that you're doing for chapter 2. And then also I want to provide an example or two of factor analysis, which is the week 3 material. So, like I said, tonight there may not be a lot to cover. so much. You know, I'll just kind of jump in and go through some of the material I have. And then if you have questions or anything like that, obviously we'll kind of go from there. How's that sound? Good? Okay, perfect. And you'll have to, you can let me know either together as a group, or you can send me a message and let me know whether this format is working okay for you. Again, I want to give you the material or the support that you need, but I don't want to kill you with too much of just belaboring, just spending too much time doing nothing. So let me know as we progress week by week if this format is good or if it could be improved. Okay. All right. This past week then, and I'm going to share my screen. I have to kind of figure that out here. Okay, there we go. So this past week, we spent some time on just kind of the introduction to multivariate analysis. And to be honest, the homework assignment was really meant to serve a couple purposes. One, to just kind of review or maybe bring into your kind of sphere of awareness the idea that there's a lot of different software technologies that are available, and they all serve a different purpose. And you're going to either adopt ones that you like or ones that you're familiar with. But also you'll end up, learning and training on new ones as well, just kind of as the needs arise. So one of the things just as a researcher that you should become comfortable with is this idea of switching platforms or switching software from time to time, just depending on what the technique requires that you're going to do. So, if you're going to do qualitative work, there's software that's appropriate for qualitative work. If you're going to design surveys, there's software appropriate for that. If you're going to organize data and manage it and store it, there's software that's better for that. If you're going to analyze it, it all depends on the type of technique or analysis that you're going to do. And that may move you in a direction in terms of what software to use. So it's not meant to be daunting or overwhelming or anything like that. But part one of this homework assignment was really just to expose you to the variety of different softwares that are available, and the idea that they all serve a different purpose. And as a researcher, it's in your best interest to be able to get comfortable with a software platform and then be able to move to a different software platform as needed. Don't be surprised if you pick up a different technique or a different application, a couple times, once every couple years or something like that. It just happens. I know over the last 2 years, I guess, I picked up PLS-SEM, which is a specific type of structural equation modeling software to do partial least squares modeling. I hadn't really done a lot of that in the past. I had used other software for SEM. And so anyways, I forced myself to learn it. And so now I kind of have that in my toolbox, and I can use that. I haven't done really a lot with R. And I know a lot of people are using R because it's free and I guess it's somewhat flexible. That's probably a software that I should become more familiar with and actually have just a sense of comfort using it. I don't know how often I would use it, but it's probably something that I should become more aware of. So even, regardless of where you are in the research profession, it's pretty common to adopt new techniques and skills and software. So that was kind of the idea of that first part of that assignment. And by the way, I have all your assignments, and I'm just kind of filtering through them. I've really briefly read every one of them. So they look good. I can always encourage you to write more and provide more depth, but these look pretty sufficient, and I'll have these turned around for you very quickly here within either today or tomorrow, probably, in terms of on Blackboard with a grade. But generally speaking, folks, you're all doing fine. Number 2 on the homework assignment, the second area was, the second and third areas were really the idea that there are some statistical or some analysis techniques that you've done, that you have a background in, that you've covered in other classes. And so just making sure that as a refresher, you remember what some of those are as you move forward. So just things like being able to describe data, taking a mean, being able to understand what type of data you're dealing with, whether it's nominal or ordinal or interval or ratio, those types of things, are kind of background areas that it's more or less expected that you're familiar with at this point. Also, just some things like kind of having a general idea of what a t-test is, what an ANOVA is, the f-test for the ANOVA. Post hoc tests with ANOVAs are helpful too sometimes. These are all things that we run this analysis very routinely with the data set. It's almost like second nature. So these are things, again, I may throw around these terms if something's confusing or you're not quite sure what we're talking about, feel free to ask. But again, the bivariate analysis methods, where you're looking just at 2 variables, either together or in some combination, those are things that you're probably doing a lot of. And also describing data, something that you're already probably doing a lot of, in terms of moving forward. The last part of the homework assignment asked you to look at different multivariate techniques, and quite frankly, it's really just a summary of kind of the chapters in the textbook, and the idea that we're looking at systems of variables, typically when we're looking at multivariate analysis, as opposed to individual variables and their relationship with each other. So if we think of like a system of variables or 2 systems of variables and thinking of how they relate to each other, then that's kind of the idea. And there are a whole host of different methods and techniques that are used with multivariate analysis, and you've kind of been exposed to those in this homework assignment. And again, it's really a preview of the text, and also a strong preview or a review of chapter 1. Chapter 1 has an area in it, I don't know if it's towards the end, or it just has kind of a review of multivariate techniques. It's like chapter 1 of most textbooks. It's just kind of an overview of what's to come. And so so that's kind of what that is. And I mentioned that we're not going to cover all of those in this course, but we're going to cover some of them, a lot of those methods that are in the text. And for your 550 project, you'll be collecting data, and so with that data set, you're going to want to do the summary statistics, and you're going to want to describe your variables and describe the data. You're probably going to be doing some between group testing. So you're going to do like probably some t-tests and some ANOVAs and things like that. You will probably be trying to do some cause and effect, or testing some cause and effect elements. So how you do that, again, it might be in some form of a bivariate type of a thing, but it also may be like in a regression or some type of a model that you put together. Chances are you're going to do some factor analysis or probably some cluster analysis in order to form groups. So, you know, with the 550 presentation or 550 project, it's expected that you're going to do one or two or three of these multivariate methods or techniques. You're going to probably apply them to your data as you go. So the good thing about this class is that what we talk about, you can get your hands dirty, you can jump into data, and you can apply it right away. And you'll also be using this class kind of like as a template or a toolkit for what you do in 550. So that's, you know, I hope I hope the good things about this experience for you this next 9 weeks is that you'll actually be able to use and do what we talk about, as opposed to it just being kind of theoretical or whatever. You should be able to get your hands dirty and actually jump right into this work quite a bit. Okay, so so that was kind of what chapter 1 was about. And again, if we look at Blackboard, I should probably, going into the coursework kind of tab here, module 0, it's the kind of the preparation for analysis. There, again, I trust that you have perhaps opened up these folders and maybe watched these videos. These videos are kind of the class content for kind of what we're covering. So hopefully you've read the text, you've looked at these, and you know, again, chapter 1, multivariate techniques is hammered in there, but also some other theoretical things that deal with power and effect. So those are some things that are kind of important to think about when you're dealing with some of this analysis. And these are things we'll come back to throughout the semester, actually, or the term. Measurement scales for sure, knowing like what type of data you have, what type of data you're looking at. I think sample size is in here as well. So being able to determine whether you have a proper sample size for enough to give you enough power to be able to pick up the effects that you want to find. Just as a general rule, a lot of folks don't actually measure or calculate the confidence interval, like you use that as a method for sample size. A lot of people use kind of a rule of thumb type of a thing. A lot of times that's what I do. So typically when I think of like estimating variables, I want at least 5 responses per thing I'm estimating. So a lot of times I'll just take the number of questions I have and multiply it by 5. And then if I have a situation where I'm splitting up my data, I'll multiply it for each time I split up my data. You know, we can kind of walk through some of those if you're curious. You don't need thousands and thousands and thousands of responses as long as your sample is really representative of your population of interest. With your 550 presentation, you know, you need enough of a sample to run your analysis. And so that could be a couple hundred responses up to, you know, 1,000, 1,200, something like that might be the range that I typically see in, you know, from that class. But again, these are types of things that we'll talk about when we look at look at data. In fact, I have some data here tonight to just look at a little bit. So we can just kind of walk through some of this. And again, chapter 1 and chapter 2 is all about just getting to know your data. In fact, if we were to go into this week's material, so module 1's material, you know, this first kind of folder here, getting to know your data. It's just a video on, if you have a data set, what to start to look at and what you might want to be, what I usually do when I get to, look at it and become familiar with it. And then chapter 2 is actually pretty deep, pretty dense. There's actually a lot to do in chapter 2. So you're going to want to really, chapter 1 is like a cakewalk compared to chapter 2 in terms of, kind of getting into the data. Chapter 2 is going to deal, again, we're evaluating data. You have a data set in front of you. We want to make sure that we know what the characteristics of the data are before we start our analysis. So doing things like looking for missing data and then dealing with missing data if we find it. Looking for and dealing with outliers, so respondents who don't behave like the rest of the respondents, and being able to identify those data points or those respondents in your sample that are abnormal and thinking about whether you want to keep them or not. Looking at the data variable by variable and determining whether it's normally distributed or not, or rather what the distribution is of it. A lot of times you gather data and the data is not normally distributed, and that may be okay, but it may not be okay. A lot of times it is what it is, and you have to kind of do the analysis with this idea that your data may not be normally distributed. If it's not normally distributed, you might consider doing a transformation to help get it closer to be normally distributed. And so this chapter then deals with looking at your data this way. So there's really not anything in chapter 2 called a multivariate method, but it's all the things that you might do before you actually start an analysis, where we're checking the data, we're looking to see whether it's behaving properly, whether it's what we expect it to be, and then making changes to it if needed. So that's why it's kind of a dense chapter. It's not really a particularly easy chapter, because it's dealing with those types of things. So there's a lot of videos here, a number of examples, and again, what you may consider doing is reading through the chapter, looking at the chapters and the data that's available for it. So again, if we look at Blackboard and we click on data, the HBAT data is the data set that you'll see in the textbook. So the data set is here. It's in SPSS. We can, I think it's right here. If we pull it up in SPSS, that HBAT data is here. So if you're familiar with SPSS, you can do this. You can pull this up, and as you're reading chapter 2 or any of the chapters, the data, whatever data set they're using in the textbook, you could follow along and you can run the analysis, and just kind of confirm that you're doing what they're doing, and that the results seem to be similar. So yeah, I would do that. The other thing that you can do is, a lot of times in my videos that I do, I have an example or an illustration video where I'll be doing the same thing with one of the data sets. And again, you can follow along, run SPSS, do the same stuff I'm doing with the data sets that we're involved with. And you should be good to go. Okay, so any questions so far? Did you find the first homework assignment to be okay? Yeah. All right. I see some heads nodding. Maybe. All right. Good. So again, this homework assignment for week 2, you'll be actually using data, and it'll be a data set. When you go into the assignment, just assignment. It's this assignment 1 data summary and preparation. And the data that you'll be using is in this automobile interest survey. So coming up this week, automobile interest survey is where it is. What you have available to you is the survey itself, and then an Excel data set. So you'll want to take the Excel data and put it into SPSS probably, and then do the analysis that is required on the homework assignment. Another thing that, like, just as a matter of practice, you want to get into the habit, probably it's a good habit to get into in terms of like looking at the survey and mapping the survey question to the actual data that you're seeing. I do this all the time just to make sure that the data that's in the spreadsheet kind of makes sense based on the question that was asked. Because sometimes you never know, like data could get transferred and a column could shift over, or something weird could happen, and the data that you actually end up kind of evaluating, for some reason, maybe it isn't the question that you thought it was or whatnot. So just being really careful in the data management process of making sure that the data matches what was asked in the survey and kind of makes sense as you go forward. Just as a point of caution, I'd strongly suggest getting in the habit of just going back, making sure that you're cool with kind of where the data came from. And again, this is part of, I think, the getting to know your data part. I would say, and I think the text may even mention this, probably 70 or 80% of the work is in research deals with managing data. And probably 10 or 15% of the work might actually be the analysis. I mean, a lot of the work is just managing the data, making sure it's in the right form, it's in the right format, and everything is right and everything looks good. So I can't stress enough how important it is just to spend time with your data early on, making sure that it looks like it looks like it should look like. I think that's probably a kind of a good thing. So one of the examples I have for tonight, and again, oops, no, I didn't want to do that. I've got, so I did a survey. This was actually a really, really fast survey that I did, a really quick survey. I put it together really fast, and it's for a paper that's actually under review right now, relating to marketing research education. So, kind of the background is sometimes nice to know, in terms of, if you see a data set. So basically this survey is a mixture of qualitative and a little bit of quantitative. It's not very long. It only took about 8 or 9 minutes at the most, probably, for people to take on average. It went out to people who have marketing degrees earned over the last 10 years or so. There were about 800 or 900 people in the sample frame, or who received the invitation to take the survey. And I think our sample size is about 180 or 190 or so total. So just as a little framework or just idea. So this was sent out in an email. Respondents clicked on the link and then they answered these questions. And basically the questions relate to marketing research classes. So you can see, like, did you take a marketing research course? When did you take it? And that's if you did. And this is in Qualtrics. As you think about your current job, how well were you prepared from your research class? And then just a variety of other questions. So, so this question here, question 4, that would be a Likert-like scale. It's a 5-point scale from not well at all to extremely well. So if you just jot in your mind, that's probably going to be either an interval or a ratio scale, depending on how it's measured. looks like an interval scale because there's not like a true zero here. So that means it's metric. That means this question here, I can take a mean of, I can look at standard deviation. Range really doesn't matter. These are going to be coded 1 to 5, so range is kind of a silly thing to look at, but standard deviation or variance is something we'd certainly have. You know that if we have metric data, then we can do all kinds of analysis on it, ranging from, we can use it in regressions, we can use it in lots and lots of ways, because it's that type of data. So as you're walking through a survey or in your data, you kind of want to know what your variables are. You know, what year did you take a research course? Well, that's going to be kind of an interesting variable. It's really kind of ordinal probably, or something like that. Maybe it's interval. You probably wouldn't use year in this case as a continuous variable. And in fact, the way it's recorded, if you look here, each of these years is actually just like a number. So it's like labeled like 1 through 21. So in my data set in this column, I'm not going to have 2020, 2019 or anything like that. It's going to be 1 through 21. That's what'll appear in that column. So that variable there, I'm not exactly sure how I could use it. Well, I do know how I used it actually. I split the sample and I looked at recent graduates versus former graduates over the first 5 years and the last 5 years. But I didn't really do a lot with it beyond that, and maybe we could. Other questions here. We have a couple different question types. Here's another. This is sort of like a Likert-like scale, but it's not really. It's this range from when you make decisions, whether you use a lot of external information or whether you use a lot of internal sort of intuition or gut feelings when you make decisions, and sort of how much of each do you use. So this is kind of a weird question, and I wasn't exactly sure how well it would play, to be quite frank. So I asked this a couple different ways, but this is like 100% personal intuition. Like, I never look at outside data. I only trust my gut to make a decision. And then there's sort of, it ranges up here to 100% reported information, where all I do is I make decisions solely based on data that I see, is basically the idea. Again, this question, it's kind of new. I don't know that I've seen one like this before. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do, so I asked it a different way in question 6. So in question 6, I asked more or less the same thing, only I wanted people to use a slider. And the first one here is, what percentage of your decisions are made by reported data, and how many decisions do you make just by using your gut or your instinct or personal intuition? So this second Q6 sort of asks the same thing as this Q5, only in a little bit of a different way. And the reason why I asked both of these questions is because I really didn't know how the respondents were going to respond. I didn't know what type of data I was going to get, in terms of which way I asked the question, if it would matter or not. So anyways, and I'm still kind of tinkering around, but now this is clearly a 5-point scale. It's really not like a true Likert-like scale. It's almost like a semantic differential scale. If personal intuition and reported data are complete opposites, then that's like a semantic differential scale, where you look at like two anchored ends of a spectrum. So that's more or less what that one is. It's fairly evenly spaced, so you'd probably call it interval data. I don't know that there's a true zero, but maybe you can imply a true zero, but that's probably what it'd be. For these sliders, well, there is a 0 point, and you can't go below it, and there's 100, and so these are probably ratio scales. measuring, these two bookends, your personal intuition versus data, like reported data. Okay, so again, sometimes when you create a survey, or sometimes when you put a survey out, if you're using items that are new, you oftentimes don't know exactly how they're going to perform. So if you're doing repeated measures, or you're doing a survey that you've done over and over and over again, you're probably not going to experience this, but sometimes you just don't know how data is going to behave. And so that's what I did there. Another couple other questions. Again, I used another scale here that was contrived from internal versus external sources. This is like, do you use information to make decisions your company has, or do you go outside your company to gather data or use data to make decisions? So kind of like the other question before, got an open-ended question here, like for people just to simply list key performance indicators that they use in their job. Oh, this is qualitative data. This is just a list of like, what do you use on a regular basis to evaluate performance and do whatever. Okay, so open-ended box there for that. Then we've got a bunch of scales here just on how frequently you look at key performance indicators, how often they're used, how much impact you have over them, and so forth. So there's like 5 or 6 here, just sort of scales on questions on how people use key performance indicators. And part of this too is you ask sometimes you ask an open-ended question like this, and that will get people thinking about like what you want them to think about. So I'm priming them to think about key performance indicators in part by asking this question, and then I follow up with some other questions about key performance indicators, and then I shift and I ask people to give me like research problems that they encounter in their regular job. So another open-ended question here, again, more qualitative data. So this survey was a lot of exploratory. This is like a real exploratory survey. This is not, like I would never form hypotheses using this survey. It's not far enough along in the research process to do that. It's really just, like fact-finding type of stuff. Then I have some demographics. So we have an education. So this is going to be, probably, you might think of it as sort of ordinal. It's not interval. It's labeled and sort of in an order of progressive, degrees of educational level. We have an open-ended box on what degree you have and what your title is. So these are open-ended areas. So they need to be treated like qualitative data. Again, kind of what type of work you do, open-ended. And then we have some other demographic data here. So, mostly nominal for gender, nominal for ethnicity. Age, you could consider this probably, I would probably consider it, ordinal. I doubt I would ever try to make this into interval or anything like that. That'd be tough to sell to anybody. Okay, so you see like this short survey, there's kind of this variety, and you should be able to go through a survey. You should be able to identify what type of question you're looking at and what the data is going to look like when you get it into a spreadsheet. So if I got this into a spreadsheet, this exact same data, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have like these numbers, and these numbers obviously are going to be things that go into, that are from those questions. So how much that scale of 1 to 5, the percentage of intuition versus the percentage of external data used to make decisions, that's this column here, followed by the 2 sliders that we looked at. Those are the 0 to 100, would be where those are there. So some analysis could be done on those. Those are interval or ratio like things. Then we look at like, all right, column L, clearly that's like what key performance indicators do you use? And this is going to be, this is all qualitative stuff. This needs to be coded. Probably need to do some open coding. You guys had a lot of fun with qualitative, right? With Mr. Jordan. Yeah. Do you remember that class? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
The enthusiasm. I love it. So qualitative work is really hard. It's not easy, and it's not my personal cup of tea, but for exploratory work and whatever. So the key here is, though, eventually a lot of folks will take this, they'll code it, and then they'll try to arrange it in a thematic way, like by themes. And and we might even try to like count how many times a theme occurs or is specified. I mean, we have like customer satisfaction. Like I may go through this list and see how many times customer metrics appear. Or, we have conversion right here, conversion rates. This is maybe a salesperson probably is looking at this. So what I might do is I might look at like what the person's occupation is, and then look at the metrics that occupation uses. But that's kind of like, I mean, there's a lot of analysis that could be done, and it's not particularly easy analysis. And that's not really what we would be doing in multivariate. This is just an illustration of a data set. And what you want to do is, again, look at, does the data match what the survey was asking? And does it seem to be right? I mean, does it seem to look appropriate to you? This particular data set, I had to do a lot of, just like these titles, trying to identify what these titles mean and making some sense in terms of whether it might be an entry level type of like a person, or whether they're a supervisor, or whether they're an executive, or sort of what they're doing. So that kind of work had to be done. All right, but the point of all this is for you to just continue to be familiar with the source of your data, where the data is coming from, who collected it, what the time frame was, who the sample frame was, what the sample size was. Get a feel for kind of the nuances of how the data came to you, and then confirm with like a spreadsheet like this, or confirm that the data looks appropriate and it seems like it's the right thing to do. So if I were to say, like, beginning of chapter 2, we're looking at getting to know your data. This is getting to know your data. This is, this data here is only about 2 months old. It's not, it was just collected here not too long ago. So there's still actually, there could be a lot of analysis left in it. Initially, all that was done was just some basic summary statistics, nothing really too, nothing too complicated, or no models or anything like that, just real descriptive summary type stuff so far. This data, we put it into SPSS. So the exact same data was brought over and put into SPSS. Here we have the variable view. You could look at the data view if you wanted to for this data. Again, we have sort of the questions that are here that were asked, and the values within each one. So this first question, did you complete a research course? It's either going to be yes or no, or I don't recall. So it's either going to be a 1, 2, or 3 in the data set. That seems right. What year did you take your research course? Here we've got, again, just like we saw in Qualtrics, we see how each year is identified by a label, in this case 1 through 21. So that matches what we saw in the survey. There shouldn't be a problem with that. Again, the scales should all be in here more or less, terms of what's there. We have some nominal data. So the management key performance indicators, again, that's qualitative, that's string data, that's going to be there. We also down here had the management questions. That was open-ended. That was there. Now, some of these other things, degree field, job title, functional area, some of these things we needed to put into, we needed to code, and then we needed to put them into a category. So what we did was, for your current job title, we put all the job titles together and we coded them into one of these areas. So all the respondents fell into one of these areas. There was a generic marketing, but then there was also a lot of people who were in sales and so on and so forth. So there were 17 different sort of categories. And so that was a bit of legwork, and that's like taking your qualitative work and then making sure that it's in here and it makes some sense. You know, qualitative work can be subjective, and you need to usually have a couple people doing it, and you know, it's tough work. So so is there going to be some error in that because of the analysis process? Yep, absolutely. But it is what it is, and I'm pretty happy with where it is right now. So then that kind of brings us up to this idea that we can take these variables and we can summarize them. We can just simply look at some of the descriptive elements. If it's a nominal, if it's a nominal variable, or something like ordinal, then we would probably take some type of a frequency. We have age, for instance. We want to kind of know what the distribution of ages are. Then we would jump in there and we would see that most of our respondents, 76% of the respondents, are between the ages of 25 and 34. You know, followed by 18 to 24-year-olds, and then it kind of goes up from there. We can certainly do that, and again, we can look at all of these types of things that you know you might use just to simply describe your data. So as a matter of just practice, it's a super good idea just to kind of do this with all your variables, or all your key variables anyways, the ones that you're actually using in analysis. You know, even if you don't report this, or even if it doesn't end up in a report somewhere or whatever, you know, just as a researcher, you know, this is just, again, getting to know your data, getting to understand it, and making sure that it's kind of, you know, makes sense to you and what you think it should be. Okay, so again, chapter 1 deals with just kind of a broad summary of you know, kind of what multivariate analysis is and kind of where you are up to this point. Chapter 2 kind of gets into where we are here, and then looking at your data and looking at your variables to make sure that they're suitable for analysis as you move forward. So I'm going to actually leave that for you to do for this week. You know, there are videos, so you're going to be able to read the text, watch the videos, and I encourage you to, as you're reading the text, I strongly encourage you just to walk through the HBAT data that they use in the text. And then your homework assignment for the actual week Um, sorry, I'll get to it here. You know, review the data set, the code book, and then you've got the data in Excel. Just, you know, one of the things, again, you want to do is just look at the questions that were asked, because you've got the survey, and then look at the data and make sure that they make sense to you, so you understand where the data is coming from. Properly prepare an SPSS file, meaning take your data that's in Excel and put it in, import it probably, or cut and paste it, however you want to do it, into SPSS. Do make sure that when you do SPSS that you're labeling everything correctly. So like in the HBAT data here, all of these measures are either nominal, scale, or I think interval, or ordinal, I guess, is the other one that's offered. So, you know, make sure that your data is properly, you know, kind of identified there. It helps to properly label, but that's kind of up to you in terms of how much you want to label and how much you want to put in here. And the more you put in terms of labels and values, the easier it is to interpret the results later on. I mean, it's just, you don't have to remember as much if you do more here, but that's kind of up to you. Assess sample size. So after watching the videos and reading the chapter on sample size you had in chapter 1, you can determine whether the sample size is appropriate or not. Also, from chapter 2, run an analysis to identify outliers and decide whether you want to take outliers out, and how many you want to take out, and sort of the criteria that you're using. Do the same thing for missing data. So again, watch the videos, read the chapter. There are some very specific steps on missing data analysis, and deciding how to deal with missing data. More importantly, that's like the hardest thing. So like me personally, I very rarely throw data out. I very rarely discard respondents because they're missing data. Unless it's something systemic or something that I know is going on that's really going to, you know, kind of out of the ordinary. If it's not random, if it's systemic, you know, missing data, then I deal with it. But again, that's that step there. Report appropriate summary statistics for each variable. So, you know, just knowing your data and what type of questions you have will lead you to know what type of descriptives to report. And then assess normality for each variable. So for each metric variable. So for the metric variables, those would be the scaled variables. Assess each one for normality. And then consider transformations. So the reality is the data set that you're going to have is really messy, and it's not like real pretty. There's a lot of non-normality in it. So don't kill yourself trying to transform every single variable. Just think about how you would transform them. Maybe attempt to transform a few of them. That would be good. It's not like often that we transform variables. We really don't transform them that often. Sometimes, yeah, but you don't have to be like a stellar superstar on transforming variables, but you do need to know kind of the idea behind why you would transform a variable to help it become more normally distributed, and kind of what some of those processes are. Okay, and again, this is kind of dense. There's a lot to these topics in chapter 2. So this is not necessarily an easy chapter to slug through. I'll give you that. I mean, that's just the way it is. Yeah, are there any questions on the homework assignment then that's coming up? Okay, so in the past, we've made a really big effort to spend a lot of time on data preparation and checking for the assessing data for its appropriateness to do multivariate analysis. So there are assumptions that are made about your data before you do multivariate analysis. Like you're worried about multicollinearity, you're worried about heteroscedasticity, normally distributed data and things like that. And you should be aware of what's going on with your data. But I don't want you to get too sidetracked by it. So like you'll see in the data that you have this assignment for, a lot of the data is not normally distributed. But that's not going to stop you from doing analysis on it, probably. I mean, the reality is a lot of times when we're using really, really short scales, it's not going to be normally distributed. If you're using a 5-point scale, it's going to be hard to find normally distributed data. If you're using a 100-point scale and you've got a good sample size, you better find normally distributed data. But if it's a short scale, it's just not going to happen as often. So I want to just kind of preface and caution you that these are important ideas in statistics and in analysis, in terms of finding outliers and finding normality and doing transformations and stuff like that. But they don't kill a project. So like if you did your 550 project, you collected a bunch of data, you labeled it all properly, you summarized it and described it properly, and then you realized a lot of it was like non-normally distributed, you would still probably do all of your analysis. It's not going to be a game changer. It's not going to be what we call a fatal flaw. There are things we can do to correct the data or to move past the data if needed. Okay, so I will say that, I will preface that, because sometimes students get really, really anxious because they look at data sets and sometimes the data is not pretty. In fact, it's not ever really, really pretty. You just have to work with it, right? That's just part of it. Okay, so, all right, so with that, I want to just, let's see if there's anything else that I was thinking about. Sample size. Real quickly, chapter 1, we did that homework assignment. So we're in week 2 moving forward. Again, this is the chapter 2. You've got the videos, you have the homework assignment. Did you guys have any questions? Oh, I'm talkative tonight. Yes, sir, Anthony.
Would there be any qualitative data that we need to code in the assignment that you're aware of?
Anthony, I can't hear you if you're speaking. Are there any?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Would there be any qualitative data in the data set that we're going to be looking at that we need to code and stuff?
Qualitative data scares me.
Okay.
No, I say that in jest. There's not going to be any, no. And in fact, I don't think we deal with qualitative hardly at all. So don't, yeah. Numbers, man. Numbers are the only thing I like. Give me a number all day long and words can go somewhere else. Don't tell Mr. Jordan I said that. What other questions? Are you able to find everything okay? I mean, is everything going all right, just generally speaking? Okay, I know week 1, honestly, there wasn't, I mean, other than getting familiar with the text maybe, and, kind of that opening assignment, now this week I can't stress enough the ramp up with actual data work that you'll have this week compared to the. I would start, I'd download and look at the data probably early this week, just so that I probably wouldn't wait till Saturday, or whatever, if you can help it, I would suggest. So, all right, well, that's about all I have for right now. Again, I didn't think that tonight would be a particularly long session, unless you guys had other questions or things of that nature. Next week, basically what we'll do is we'll review the homework assignment. So we'll probably walk through some of the data and answer any questions that you have, and things like that. And we'll certainly do an example or two of factor analysis. So I would, kind of expect, a longer session next week. Just again, factor analysis is kind of, you could spend a whole semester working on it, to be frank. I have before. So we'll spend a week, and you guys will be superstars with it. I guarantee you. It'll be fun to do. You'll like it. Any other questions? So let me know if things are going, if you need anything, or if you have questions during the week, shoot me an email or whatnot. I'm happy to, I'm basically, my schedule right now is we've got a new group of students coming in to the program who are just starting. So I'm super excited about that. We've got 6 new students coming in this summer and 3 in the fall. So we're onboarding them. But I've got 4 research projects that I'm working on, writing and doing data work on, and then we're slugging through this class. So honestly, if you have any questions at all, feel free to touch base, and we'll work with them. Okay. All right. With that, I guess I'll let you guys go if you don't have any other questions. All righty. All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Floyd.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.